Well, folks, this week the Democrats truly outdid themselves. A week after the Republican National Convention, Mr. Momentum has swung against the socialist-left, catapulting President Trump to weathering near statistical ties in key battleground states. So much that bumbling Joe Biden has found his way out of the basement, attempting to muster as much campaigning as his Democratic dementia-ridden mind can sustain. As America's unemployment rate continues to fall, Joe Biden and the liberal Washington elite attempt to scramble their anti-freedom fighter jets, anticipating that maybe, just maybe, their 2020 polls are only as accurate as their 2016 numbers that indicated a Hillary win, but ultimately sent the carpetbagging ex-senator packing as Trump is headed to the White House. As always, I have all these week's political highlights, what's hot and what's not, and just how bad Joe Biden and the Democratic Party have allowed our nation to get. I'm your host, Eric Wright, and you are listening to the Closet Conservative Podcast. By now, we've all seen her liberal highness and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi when she showed her true colors this week, and that of the entire socialist left establishment, when she demanded an immediate apology from a small salon owner after surveillance video surfaced of her violating the laws of San Francisco and directly contradicting her COVID-19 regulation stance. In traditional liberal fashion, Pelosi placed blame for her irresponsible and hypocritical actions squarely on someone else, claiming that she was set up during her most recent salon visit. Now, what we should all be upset about is the outcome of her dye job. Instead, she took to her liberal friends in the drive-by media to say that a small business salon owner intentionally deceived her and her staff by misinforming her of the current San Francisco COVID-19 restrictions on beauty spots. Now, if you think really, really hard, folks, you might just recall that Nancy Pelosi, in addition to being the current House Speaker, represents the people of San Francisco, and yet she claims that she is unaware of the current COVID-19 restrictions that she commands utter obedience from across the nation. And if you recall, the Ice Queen herself has attacked President Trump almost daily for his failure to routinely wear masks while attending public events. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The third in line to the presidency is incapable of knowing the current COVID-19 restrictions that govern her constituency. You're shocked, I know. But perhaps Pelosi has been hanging around Joe Biden for too long, who this week discredited President Trump's visit to Kenosha, Wisconsin, by following up a trip of his own to Kenosha, Wisconsin. It wouldn't be a good visit for the once vice president without some significant gaffes, right? In the wake of the most recent police shooting of an African-American and criminal Jacob Blake, and while speaking in Kenosha, surrounded by Blake's family, old Biden's speech aimed at addressing racial unrest veered into somehow talking about inequities and taxes at one point. It was kind of strange. But Biden stopped himself from laying out his tax policy in detail, saying that if it goes on any longer, they'll shoot me. That's right, folks. Father Time and champion of Black America himself used his stage to discuss the shooting of innocent minorities and police brutality by saying that he needed to wrap things up to avoid being shot by his campaign. I promise you can't make this stuff up. And some out in America still don't believe that the DNC is intentionally attempting to keep Joe Biden away from open mics and video cameras. If it wasn't for such a poor performance in the DNC, and for the president rallying recent and further support from the Republican base in pulling in undecided voters, old Biden and the Dems would have allowed and preferred for Bumbling Biden to wait out the 2020 election on the confines and in the confines of a bomb shelter. Let's face it, folks, Joe Biden has no real intention of wanting to debate President Trump. He lacks the fortitude, the forethought, and the brain function fiber makeup to put on a good showing. It would be an outright embarrassment, and yet the Democrats can't seem to keep the man secluded. And the reason? Because deep down, the Democratic Party and the masses at Maddow-MSNBC know that yet again, the 2020 dumpster election polls are inaccurate and almost illustrate just how flawed the liberal pollster and pundits are. Before the RNC, polls from CNN and other mainstream media outlets showed Trump by 12 to 15 points down in nearly a dozen states across America. And while I do not want to take away from the RNC's performance and the utter failure of the Hollywood elites and the wannabe conservatives during the DNC, President Trump didn't outline anything other than what he has said and acted upon over the last 3.5 years. Preserving American history, keeping our nation's citizens safe, secure, and employed have been staples under the Trump administration. And while the fireworks on the National Mall were a great touch, Democrats are confused in thinking that conservatives are fickle-minded. They are not. Somehow they believe that some flashy fireworks and pomp and circumstance has elevated Trump in the most recent polls, folks. I'm here to tell you that is not the case. The truth is, Trump has always been in the 2020 race. In fact, he was primed for 2020 when he took the oath of office in January of 2017. Democrats find Trump dangerous, simply because he has called them out on their desperation and their deceptions. And like Pelosi this week, the liberal agenda pushing Biden onto death's door has illustrated their hypocrisy, honestly saying and showing America that there is a different set of rules for them and everyone else. If you want to see just how much disdain Democrats have for America, look no further than who's on their 2020 ticket. Joe Biden has had over 50 years to govern, keep promises, and promote his newfound vision of equality. But yet for 50 years, Joe Biden has been a bust. A philandering, done-nothing, do-nothing Democrat who has taken advantage of a black president to deceive blacks into believing that he actually and truly cares for their well-being. Biden doesn't care about the BLM movement. He cares about his move into the White House. And that's why he continued his deception when he nominated Kamala Harris as his VP, not for her merit only, but for the color of her skin. Like Biden, Kamala Harris has done nothing to excel and promote her people. In fact, her service within the San Francisco's DA's office and further continued as California Attorney General exemplified an egregious and erroneous real view on criminal reform. Like Biden, when given a chance to make a difference, Harris failed and folded. Ladies and gentlemen, as we near November the 3rd, the Democratic Party will not stop. Heck, they haven't stopped since Trump took office. From coast to coast, Biden and Harris, Pelosi to Schumer, they have all been consumed by hate. And that hatred has rooted them and their party into collapse and to be overtaken by communist leadership and the socialistic scheme they wish to put upon our nation. Our democracy deserves better than what any Democrat can provide. Let's keep Biden locked up in the basement. Let's send Harris and her Heiness Pelosi packing back to the Golden State. As I wrap up today, I want to let you know that if you haven't checked out the latest episode of the Jared Dyson Show, click on over to the Liberty Loft and tune in. Jared really breaks down in detail on his longer platform on the destruction offered by today's Democratic Party. As always, thank you all for tuning in. Take care of yourself and others. This is Eric Wright, and this has been the Closet Conservative Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Please remember to give a 5-star review and share our podcast with your friends. The Closet Conservative Podcast is a production of the Liberty Loft. Copyright The Liberty Loft, 2020. You can find more shows and information on our website, www.thelibertyloft.com, or any of our social media channels.